Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back with the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. And sorry, videos have been kind of few and far between as compared to normal, but to be fair, I mean, I was putting up like 3 a week for a year, and mostly I can do that and it's sustainable, but not always can I do that and it be sustainable, especially not this time of the year. Going into the busy season with the distilling industry. October, November, December get super busy, September as well, but working on multiple projects, as well as working on the garden here at the house, doing some updates to the house, working on the farm that I inherited / bought from my father. So it may only be 2 videos a week sometimes, guys, and I apologize for that. I do have some more cool process stuff coming along, and work on the Alchemist Cabinet Volume 3 book is coming along as well. And for those of you who haven't bought the first 2 books, those will be available again here very shortly at the alchemistcabinet.com in the warehouse section. So I haven't had them up here lately because we've been having problems getting Amazon to ship us the books for some reason. Like everything else in the world, it just seems that everything has just came to a crawl and or a halt because nobody wants to actually do the work. They want your money, they just don't want to actually do the work. So those will be back up here shortly, and for anybody waiting on those books right now, I do apologize. We are waiting for them to come in. As soon as they come in, I'll sign them. They'll be out the door to you. So got a couple questions here for you today, and we'll try to fit 2 into one video, and I think both of these are going to be from my buddy Bob down in Costa Rica. So Bob sent me a little care package today too, and unfortunately I've already kind of taken it down to the Dungeon of Doom where I'd show it to you, but he sent me a cocktail smoking kit, which is really cool. It came with multiple different woods, oak and cherry and apple and mesquite, I believe. And I do like smoked cocktails, but more than smoked cocktails, I like smoked spirits. As you've seen here on the show, you know, oftentimes we've smoked apples, or we've smoked various grains, we've used various different woods, etc. We even smoked a bad motivator barrel. I'll probably smoke at some point in time a 1030 barrel, more than likely. And so far, both types of those barrels are holding up extremely well, and I'm very, very happy with both of them. I highly encourage you as a very serious home distiller to look into getting yourself one of them or multiple of them from both places. Nonetheless, what I'll probably use that cocktail smoking kit for, that you'll see here on the channel, is to actually smoke the jars / bottles that I put some future liquid into before I store it, so that way I can actually infuse the entirety of the spirit with, with the smoke, which is much more up my alley, because although I like cocktails and I love well-made cocktails, and I love smoked Negronis, for example, I don't make a lot of cocktails at home. If I'm drinking at home, it's probably going to be a neat spirit, or if it is a cocktail, it's probably going to be a real simple highball of some sort, more than likely. So I know that might pop your hipster bubble, but for me, that's what I'm into, guys. So anyways, moving into Bob's questions here. So thanks for all the help you give your novice community. Recently I was sparging a mash and I had some questions. Some people do not sparge, but it seems that most that do sparge do it 2 times. I was wondering what you do on personal runs and in the distillery. Do you have a preferred method? If you don't sparge a mash, how do you decide not to? Well, Bob, that's actually an interesting question, because depending on what I'm doing, where I'm doing it, why I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it, I may or may not sparge. And to be honest with you, I very, very rarely lauder and sparge. So I have done that with the reverse step-up mash for rye that we talked about in the past, that Wayne Herbert's talked about from Ozark Stillworks. I've sparged that before, and it's a bit of a pain in the ass for me with the equipment that I have. And Wayne and I specifically designed a still where I don't have to lauder or sparge anything. The Johnny 5 edition Ozark Stillworks submarine still with the air wand in it that I can turn air onto, and I can actually distill directly on the grain. Now for years at home, you know, obviously I was just running straight up washes as opposed to mashes. Now I very rarely sparge those. Every great once in a while I would, if I had the right setup, or you know, if I wanted to go through the trouble, for example, of lining a fruit press with a couple of layers of cheesecloth and pressing the liquid out of the grain, I would do that, but I got to where I was pretty lazy about doing things at home. It turns out that when you do this professionally, and you do it day in and day out, when you decide that you want to do it at home, you start to get a little bit lazy about it sometimes. I found myself at home in the past couple of years much preferring sugar shines of various types and or syrups and or extracts and things of that nature, because it's much easier generally. Although I still do cereal mashes from time to time and fruit mashes from time to time, as that Johnny 5 still makes it much easier. At the distillery, we run grain in on everything. I even run grain in on single malt. I know that that goes against the grain, if you will, against the rules of single malt, but I like that heavy, fatty flavor that it gives me in that single malt spirit coming off the still as a fresh spirit, and I certainly like what it's doing in the barrel. And Spirits of French Lick is all about breaking the perceived notions and rules of distillation, so that works really well for me. Now, when I do lauter and sparge at home, typically, like with the reverse rye step up mash that we've done here before, I usually will sparge that 2 times. Definitely at least once, sometimes 2 times. And it depends on the amount of alcohol that's in it, how many times that I will do that. Typically, I know, like way back in the day, a lot of times, you know, beer makers would sparge twice, and they do this in Scotland as well, as far as I know. And then the 3rd sparge, they would take that water and use it to start their next mash in, their next cook, right? Because it's so low in fermentable sugar that it's really not worthwhile to put into the existing wash, so you use it as your startup water for your next run, basically. I know that's probably not the answer that you're expecting, but that's the answer that I have to give, because those are just the methods that I use. You know, in the past, I have even done lazy sparges, is what I would call them. So, you know, drain a barrel all the way down to the grain bed, and then add, you know, add water to it until you're, you know, about 5 or 6 inches over top the grain bed. Stir it up real good, let it settle, and then drain that back off, leave the grain bed behind, that sort of thing. I'm not real picky. I'm a grain in and fruit in kind of guy where I can have it. You know, it's much easier to take away flavor than to add flavor after distillation. So for me, if I can get those raw ingredients into the still one way, shape, form, or the other, I want those raw ingredients in the still, right? For me, that's, you know, there's a ton of flavor in there. Now, whether that's good or bad flavor depends on what the product is and how we decide to distill it. If we decide that's bad flavor, we can always rectify a little bit. We can always, you know, run a little higher proof on it, run a deflator on it, run some plates on it, take some of that flavor away, bring some finesse into it. But for me, it's just much easier to look at it that way. And thank you very much for that smoking kit, brother. I will definitely be putting that to use. Let's see, let me move on. I know I got another one here. Let's see if I can find it somewhere. Okay, let's see. So this one's from Bob as well. So, hey Alan, thanks for the many great quality videos. Recently, I was wondering if one is fortunate enough to have 2 different size stills, for example, a 6-gallon and a 9-gallon. Usually after 3 stripping runs of around 5.5 gallons of wash, one will have enough spirit to run all 3 strips combined into the 9-gallon boiler. After some amount of water is added to proof down to 40% ABV or less, and the correct headspace is established, the resulting spirit will usually have an ABV of about 20 to 20. Let me make sure I'm reading this right. About 20. Where'd it go? About 20 or no, hold on. 20 to 25%. Sorry. I got lost there. If all 3 strips are put in the 6-gallon boiler, the spirit will be much closer to 40% ABV. Since less water has to be added to establish the correct ABV and headspace. All things being equal, is it better to run the lower ABV spirit in a large boiler or the higher ABV spirit in the small boiler, assuming the ABV in both boilers will be 40% or less and both stills are adjusted to have the correct headspace? Or does it not make much difference? In my example, the main difference seems to be the ABV comparisons and surface differences. Along the same line, considering a submarine boil, what effect does the submarine boiler's larger surface area to volume ratio have on the distillation process as compared to a round boiler of equal volume but much smaller surface area? Those are some really in-depth questions, Bob. And I don't know that I can give you the best answer in the world. The truth of the matter is, when possible, if you have enough low wines to run a larger still, you're better off to run that larger still. It's much easier to find your cuts, for one thing. That surface area depends, right? So the surface area depends on what the material is made of. Is it stainless or is it copper? Is it reactive, non-reactive? Is it in the vapor path or is it in the boiler itself? All those things make a difference. What's the raw material? Is it high protein, high nitrogen, single malt sort of stuff, or is it things like regular grain and or fruit and or various sugar washes, etc.? Because that's going to make a difference. But typically I would almost always run the larger still for a doubling still. Now there are exceptions I have to that. I love that little 3-gallon copper pot that you guys have seen me use on this channel a lot, but I also know how that pot operates. I know what to look for in that pot. If I was running something new, it wouldn't be in that pot. I would try to get enough low winds to go into a much larger pot, because it's going to make making your cuts so much easier. Typically it's not going to run as fast, it's going to run a little slower. You have more time under heat, break down more of those long chain fatty acids that have come across in the low wind distillation, into those amino acids that you want, and those flavor profiles, those phenols that you want. So typically for me, that would be my preference. Now, as far as the submarine and the surface area and all that stuff, I don't really see that much difference in the way the submarine runs versus the way that a turnip style pot still runs. They're pretty damn similar in the way that everything sort of rolls around, and the way that it approaches the outlet of the still, as it were. Now, there is a big difference between, say, the submarine still or a turnip style still, either one, and a straight-sided Appalachian style pot still. Those do run quite a bit differently. The biggest advantage to having a turnip style still and or a submarine style still is that the heating takes far less time generally, because you're not heat stacking, you're not layering levels of heat in a column. It's spread out a little bit more. There's not straight sides and hard corners, right? Everything can roll around. So as the bottom heats up, it comes to the top, rolls everything back around over and over and over again. I would say a turnip is a little more efficient at that, because it's round all the way around, versus a sub, which is flat on two sides and then rounded on the other two sides. So that would just be my general observation of the answer to your questions here. And I don't know if I even really touched on what you're truly asking here, but so much of this is sort of, it would be really your preference, right? It would really be what you think you want out of a spirit, how heavy bodied you wanted that spirit, how potentially sulfurous you wanted that spirit, etc. I mean, those things all come into play, right? Those are all considerations the distiller has to take into account before even starting the process of distillation. So, as always, guys, reach out to me, either bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, thealchemistcabinet.com, my social media, or the YouTube comments below. If I don't get to your question, please email me again, message me again. Sometimes it gets put into the message request on social media. Sometimes it gets put into the spam folder and the email, etc. Sometimes when it comes to YouTube comments, I just flat forget to copy paste them and email them back to myself. So hell, send it to all three places if you need to. I'll get to it eventually, guys. Love y'all. Later.